I don't know why Senator Cheruiyot is complaining, and the only time he goes to Kisumu is when he is arrested and is being taken to the police station. Like me, Mr. Speaker, who is in Kisumu every week. Mr. Speaker, I want to welcome our good colleagues from Kisumu County Assembly, our good neighbors. Mr. Speaker, I would have taken offense if you had not allowed me this opportunity. You know, nowadays, in these days of memes, one of the famous memes on TikTok is a young man who is in a public van, and he keeps on asking the driver, "Tumefika Kericho?" And I'm told that they can easily tell the people of Kisumu when they get to Kericho because of many other things, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I celebrate what the County Assembly is doing. This House, Mr. Speaker, the Senate of the Republic of Kenya, should never tire of training and capacity building all our 47 county assemblies to bring them to the stature, Mr. Speaker, and the capacity of the Senate, because that is our constitutional duty, Mr. Speaker, and we cannot pass on that responsibility to any other house, including the National Assembly. My view, Mr. Speaker, is that their perception and understanding of devolution and our devolved institutions, Mr. Speaker, is a bit skewed. And therefore, I take pride as a member of this House each time we have a visiting delegation from our county assemblies of various committees, leadership of those houses, Mr. Speaker, when they come here to learn, Mr. Speaker. And I know that during their time of interaction, they get to learn, not just as members, but even members of staff that accompany them. They interact from their sergeant at arms with our sergeant at arms, their members of secretariat with our members of secretariat, and members, Mr. Speaker. I wish we could do more. I'm not so much abreast with what happened in our committees, but when I used to serve in committees, Mr. Speaker, occasionally we would have members of county assemblies be allowed actually to sit with us in our committees as we transact business. The counterpart, if it is a committee on health, they'd sit with us in the Committee of Health of the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and interact and get to learn and appreciate how we transact our business. And there are times also that we'd learn for them on some of their better refined procedures than what we have here in the Senate. That is the architecture and the design of our Constitution, that these two institutions relate that way. Mr. Speaker, therefore, with that regard, I celebrate the visiting delegation from Kisumu. Mr. Speaker, I'd be very brief on this topic of the mediated version of the Division of Revenue. First, I want to celebrate the members of the Senate that serve in this committee. They gave a very good account of ourselves as a House, Mr. Speaker. I was proud every afternoon or evening when I tuned into the TV and I watched the arguments and counter-arguments from both sides of the mediation committee, Mr. Speaker. But I particularly felt proud as a senator because of the good job that the team that we sent did. Mr. Speaker, I know we would have wished for more resources. Point, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the Constitution did us in with that particular regard. If you read Article 217 of our Constitution on division of revenue, once every 5 years, and I think this exercise we shall be undertaking next year, Mr. Speaker, a very interesting experience which I want Senator Sifuna to fully participate when the time comes, because it's one of the key eye-openers for you as a senator when you participate in this exercise. We come up with the basis upon which resources are shared among us counties. Because the Constitution understood and knew that it is the Senate of the Republic of Kenya that is the primary defender of devolution, they gave us enormous power with regards to deciding this basis. So properly guided and guarded are we on this provision that once we have passed a resolution, it is the only clause or the only report that once it leaves this House, if the National Assembly wants to overturn it, they need to raise 2/3, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, for the 3 or 4 occasions that we've had the occasion to pass the revenue formula, Mr. Speaker, National Assembly, though they disagree with us, they've never had occasion to question us because the Constitution appreciated that as a Senate, that is our forte, and it is upon us to determine. And once we have agreed on the basis upon which counties share these resources, Mr. Speaker, the National Assembly takes a nod And if they disagree with us, then they have to raise 2/3 of the House. Something that only, they put us on the same pedestal like a constitutional requirement, or like the impeachment of a president or a deputy, or the overturning of a presidential memorandum, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that. But when you move to Article 218, that is where I complain, and is the basis of my complaint. I wish that on this matter of division of revenue and the determination of resources between Senate and National Assembly, we had retained similar powers, as such that once we consider division of revenue, Mr. Speaker, because we are reasonable people, it's not that we are going to sit and say, give 800 billion to counties, yet we are aware, Mr. Speaker, of our financial position. We would have been moderate in our consideration, Mr. Speaker. I wish we had similar powers as what has been provided in Article 217, Mr. Speaker, as such that upon the determination by the Senate of how much is due to the counties, then National Assembly will need 2/3 to overturn it. But here we are. Article 218 expects that Parliament shall make the decision. Parliament means both houses. And therefore, as much as many of our colleagues, because I've followed the conversation with comments being made by some of our colleagues on our social media platforms, Mr. Speaker, that our colleagues, how could you agree to this or the other? It's not upon them alone to agree. It's a duty of Parliament. Both houses must come to a conclusion. Sometimes it's not courage to bang yourself, Mr. Speaker, against the wall. It's not an act of courage. You're actually hurting yourself. I pointed out to this House 2 weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, that I was beginning to receive SMSs from governors that know me, that wanted to ask, and the question they kept on prodding is that, Majority Leader, are you likely to conclude on division of revenue before you proceed on recess? And when you ask them why, they say, we want to do at least a supplementary budget so that we have a rough idea. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, many of our county assemblies are about to break for recess, and they have no basis upon which to do their supplementary budget because we haven't done CARA for them to know what is their share of the national cake, Mr. Speaker. And it would have been completely unfair of us if we would have asked Senator Sifuna, and he knows how to stick to his guns, Mr. Speaker. In fact, he loves opposing more than supporting things, Mr. Speaker. We would have asked them that go there and just insist on 400 and don't listen to anything else. But are we helping our counties, Mr. Speaker? It is our wish that perhaps if it was possible, we'd raise these figures, Mr. Speaker. But remember, the constitutional edict is that this is a determination of Parliament, not Senate alone. Both houses must agree, Mr. Speaker. And I want to appreciate that because of that provision of the Constitution, our colleagues have done well. 387.425, Mr. Speaker, together with 8 billion from equalization fund, Mr. Speaker. Yet we are still actually going to do further, I think, before we break on recess, the conditional allocation, Mr. Speaker. We shall still achieve on or about the intention that we set out when we began this year's division of revenue bill. Mr. Speaker, you know, I take great comfort in the fact that I know that as a House, we put our best case forward, but we are also intelligent enough to listen to what our colleagues from the National Assembly are telling us and the realities that we have to live with. The truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that our economy isn't doing so well. We are under a debt distress situation where 70% of the resources that we are collecting, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, do not leave Harambee Avenue. They are collected by KRA, and CBK pays them out in debt either to foreign institutions or even local institutions that we owe these resources, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, we must learn to make live, Mr. Speaker, with the little that we have. I am particularly, Mr. Speaker, impressed because when the President gave the State of the Nation address last week on Thursday, he gave another assurance. And I don't know why Senator Sifuna is saying the President sometimes draws the wrong advice from this House. He needs to read the BPS report of the Budget and Finance Committee of this financial year. One of the things that we had challenged the executive to do is that apart from just raising taxes, is that they need actually to digitize revenue collections at KRA so that they realize more revenue. Because there's still, I am certain, Mr. Speaker, that if we were to seal revenue leakages that exist in this country, perhaps we'll raise far more than what we are trying to raise with this year's financial bill. That was a finding of this Senate, Mr. Speaker, and I am impressed that the President gave a commitment to both houses of Parliament when he addressed us last week, that they are in the final stages of digitizing our revenue collection mechanism and to reduce on wastage, Mr. Speaker, so that we have more money to share with our counties and development can be realized, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I want to celebrate and appreciate the good work that our committee has done. I see they are proposing for us 387.425. Let us make this decision so that as we walk to our villages over the Christmas holidays, Mr. Speaker, we can look at our governors straight in the face and ask them to give a good account of the resources that we have devolved to the devolved units, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, as it is today, you're actually shy on taking on the county government's officials and the governor, because they'd quickly come and speak soon after you and say, but you guys, you know, you have not even told us the basis of how much we are likely to receive this financial year. After the passage of this bill, and I want to request, Mr. Speaker, if possible, if our colleagues can speak to this mediated version of the bill today, so that we conclude on it, Mr. Speaker, and we quickly embark on Kara, so that by next week, Mr. Speaker, we can be done with this business, Mr. Speaker. We can retreat actually to the villages, you know, with our chest held high, knowing that now we have done our duty, our national duty, Mr. Speaker, and citizens can expect services from us. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I celebrate their industry. I don't want to speak long on many of the things that we addressed. Remember, this is a mediated version. Mr. Speaker, we had said what we need to say about what we expect of our county governments. I would therefore wish to end my contribution at that particular point, Mr. Speaker, and celebrate the colleagues that took time. I urge colleagues that let us quickly dispense off with this matter, appreciate the work that our colleagues are put in, and move on to other things. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.